Hi, welcome to episode 3 of Nudge Education Presents, and it's a spotlight on FASD. We've got Jess and Claire with us again. We are talking about something today which is not only a very good Scrabble score, but also a facet of FASD which is confabulation. Yes, confabulation. Or exactly how it presents. So, over to you, sir.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to be talking today about many different ways of how FASD will present in an individual. But the cliffhanger that we left last week, we just touched on confabulation, and we wanted to get into that in much more detail because it's a huge part of FASD and it's something that could potentially be very dangerous.
I find that a lot of the families who I talk to and the people who I help with young people with FASD, it's something that they struggle with the most, and it's certainly something that schools and education and teachers struggle with hugely.
Yeah.
Because it looks like lying.
Yeah, so...
Right, yeah, so what is, I mean, it sounds like amalgamation of many words, like confabulation, yeah, so what is it?
Confabulation is a symptom of memory disorders, anything that affects your memory. So it's something that you'll often see in people with dementia and Alzheimer's and different things like that. But it's also, something that's very common with people with FASD. And it's when the damage to the brain impacts the memory and memory retrieval. And so those gaps are filled up with made-up stories. So it's crazy interesting.
It is fascinating when you know what it is.
When somebody with FASD starts...
Can we just pause? Sorry. We'll go back to that. I'm just conscious that this is still on and we haven't got an audio recording. So it's an easy to edit though. So if we...
Or do we forget the...
I've got to start recording the audio, it's fine.
Will that be picking the audio up as well?
That and that here. It's both. Should be really good actually with the
that may combat the fan.
Yeah.
No harm in yours as well.
Oh no. Again, it's
So what?
Right. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so where to start? So if we say confabulation. Yeah, so confabulation, it sounds like an amalgamation of a lot of different words, but what the heck does it mean?
It's a symptom, so it's not a condition in itself, it's a symptom of memory disorders or any condition that impacts your memory. So dementia, Alzheimer's, conditions like that, and FASD as well. So what it is when the memory retrieval is impacted by the brain damage in some way, and so those gaps are filled up with made-up stories or stories that aren't necessarily made up but come from different memories. They don't necessarily fit. So it's like finding a piece from another jigsaw puzzle to fill in that
it's
missing
very
piece.
detailed as well, aren't they?
Very
a lot of detail in them. And so what it looks like to a teacher is a child in front of them completely barefaced lying to them. That's what it looks like. In a busy teacher's day, they have quite often witnessed everything that's just happened and then trying to address the situation and what is coming out of that child's mouth. And it's so frustrating. And actually, as a caregiver, as a parent of children with this, when it starts, it's a little bit scary. But one of my sons has compared living with his FASD brain to dementia lots of times. He said it feels like dementia because he can remember something one day and it's just completely gone the next, but he can say he's done it. But so I think it's so frustrating within school, and also for teachers and learning support assistants to having to manage the peer relationships when a young person or a child is coming up with these huge big lies and then they've got a child going, no, that's not what happened, and then having to deal with all of that as well. So it's a huge part of FASD, and it's very, very tricky to deal with.
So does that mean, because obviously, it must be tricky to managing a classroom, you know, to deal with as a parent. But in terms of the young person themselves, is that, I must be quite scary as well, because they're having false memories of things that when it's explained to them that actually that didn't happen.
Completely unaware of it.
So-
That is their truth. That's completely.
Yeah.
That is that's unrolling in their head, and they're telling you that
Yeah.
story. That's the truth of it to them.
Mhm.
So would you say as well, do they have quite sort of vivid imaginations as well, with your experience of your children?
My three do.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got glorious imaginations. Really impressive. Really creative minds.
Yeah.
Really creative minds. Yeah. So it's huge. There's a huge amount of plus sides.
Yeah.
There are, there are a lot of cons, but there are a lot of pros, definitely, and it's just knowing how to manage it. But I think as parents and caregivers, that can cause a lot of conflict as well between you, that, it is very, very difficult to cope with somebody lying to you. Really difficult,
Yeah.
and juggling with siblings as well, and it's just, it's no different. It is a symptom. So like a petit mal, like a mild seizure, that it is a symptom. It's something that's happening to them, and they're not by any stretch of the imagination thinking, I don't know what I'm going to say here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to come up with this ridiculous story. And I think I feel quite strongly about terming it confabulation, because it is not lies. It isn't lying. It's not, a lot of the story isn't true, but it's not lying, because lying is a very different thing. It's a definite, you choose to lie.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so
And this is you.
it's so complex
Yeah.
to
And
deal with.
do we know what's happening in the brain, why it happens? And is it fixable? Is it something you can kind of medicate for, or is it something you can train, like teach out over time?
Not that I'm aware of. No. It's simply like those gaps in memory are a result of damage to the brain for whatever reason. And in this case, we're talking about FASD. But we've spoken before about how individuals with FASD often have short-term memory problems. So we are aware of memory issues, and so you could ask a story or ask a child what had happened one day and get a very, very different story as if than when you ask them a week later. So I don't know whether there's less, or do you find in your experience that there's less confabulation once their mind has processed it rather than in the immediate moment?
Yeah,
short-term memory working?
definitely. So because I think it happens the most in a stressful situation. Yeah. So and when you're talking about children who looked after children previously, care experienced children, adopted children, and so you've got trauma in with that as well. So if something happens, because it's normally something has happened and then you're saying what's just happened there, why did that happen, and so definitely in that situation they kind of kicked into fight or flight as well. Yeah. So there's that going on, so that they're not pulling from the thinking part of the brain at all.
Yeah, it's there's a brain sort
and at that point it is absolute survival, and they're not processing it. What will come out of their mouths will just be whatever it takes to keep them safe in that situation and kind of get out of it. And I know with my three, definitely I can go back to things and unpick it a little bit with them in the right way, because I've learned everything by doing it wrong. So in the past, where I would just say, there's a photograph to show that wasn't smashed, and then you were in the kitchen and then you've just smashed that, or there's a big hole in the television screen, and your brother said that he watched you do it, and that is terrifying for them, because at the moment they're telling you what happened, that was so real to them. Yeah. So there are ways to go back to it. It could be weeks and weeks and weeks later.
I wonder as well, because what we've talked about previously is that yes, there's a high percentage of children within the care system who have this condition. We also know there's a high percentage of children in the care system go into the criminal justice system as well. So I wonder, obviously, during criminal proceedings, that when you're trying to recount something that happens and then a legal team can prove against it, I wonder how many people have actually been failed through that, or is there a legal defence?
There's a brilliant video which we can add to, I can put the link in, and it's been made by the Scottish police. I don't know which police force, can't remember which police force in Scotland, and it's absolutely brilliant, and it's about trauma, and it was created for detectives and for police when they are questioning people when something has happened. And so in the past where, you know, well, what time did you leave the bar? I can't remember. It's a bit suspicious. She can't remember. She can't remember who you were with. And in the past, it's like, oh, she's not telling the truth. Now we know what we know. We'll keep going back to this. We just know better now. We know more now. And it explains to the police force of what trauma does to a brain and why somebody who they're interviewing will respond in the way they are responding unless it's kind of teased out of them by trying to trigger, can you remember any smells, can you remember any sounds, things like that. So it's fascinating. It's one of the best videos, I think, for explaining how powerful an impact it can have on your brain and how you then behave. So there's so many people in the judicial system that
and I guess so I guess then the next step is how do you support, how do you you mentioned there's some strategies around things that might trigger off what the actual thing is. Do we know what things have worked? I mean, obviously you've got your own experiences through your children. There'll be academic research done on how you can support through this, so talk us through the kind of.
I mean, I think there's no, up until now, I haven't found a way to stop it from happening.
No.
Definitely not. I can't prevent it, I can't kind of guide through it. I just can spot it in a million places now, where in the past I couldn't, and I'm able to help other immediate family members to spot it as well and not to make a big deal out of it. I've also explained it to my children, and I did explain it to them a little bit like a seizure. Is happening in the mind, and very, very clever kids, they'll be like, oh, my mind just having a little seizure there, like, who's ate the last packet of polos? So they'll use it to their advantage.
Yeah, does it work in that way as well?
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a seizure, but they can't, like, my children do, and this is the thing, and this is what I really, really do find certainly with my kids, and I've got, I feel like I've got like this whole little test case of examples between the three of them, different personalities and stuff, but when something happens, there is absolutely no doubt that the entire detailed truth that would, like, honestly get them into so much trouble will just come out at that when I've got to the bottom of something, and then it's not a case if they weren't hiding anything from you, when you've got to the bottom of it all, unpicked it all, and then like, oh. Yeah, so, well, this is what happened, and actually I sneaked down and I took this and you didn't know, and then I took those keys, and then I said that, and that all comes out afterwards. So my three are actually incapable of lying about, actively lying. So that's actually, I've just thought about that, that's really interesting.
So,
yes,
it's like an inception thing.
No, seriously, my children can't lie.
There's a huge want to please.
Yeah,
and desire.
they can't actually lie, because lying is a very, you've got to be on the ball to do it.
Yeah.
So, and it's because sometimes they're coming out with something and I'm thinking, oh, just stay quiet, because you're getting yourself in trouble. You're going to have to put consequences.
Shut up.
Stop. And then this and said that, and then actually I tipped all of that out, and so actually that's just occurred to me.
Well, I guess that might because what we know about other spectrum disorders like autism is that there's a complete the inability to be sarcastic. I guess there's communication and social codes which might be linked in terms of things like like I say, being able to not being able to lie, always excessively telling the truth. That might be kind of a linkage.
It's interesting that you mentioned sarcasm there, because this is another thing, and this is why our children have such spiky profiles that people find so difficult to understand. My middle boy's sarcasm is razor sharp. I think I'm sarcastic. He absolutely wipes the floor with me on an hourly basis. So he is able to do that. However, in a lot of other aspects, he's 14, he could roast somebody like a 25-year-old could, but then in other areas his mental capacity to do something could be like a 6-year-old, and that's why it's so frustrating.
Well, is it sarcasm, or is it like sarcasm within sarcasm? It's actually he's playing.
Absolutely, just totally honest.
Okay. So what else? And so what else? You were talking about one of the facets of confabulation. What else? How does it present? What's the other things you were hoping to kind of raise awareness about today?
Around FASD itself.
Yeah.
Processing. And I think this probably comes into the same discussion again with audio processing and language processing. Again, so like with language processing, when we consider confabulation again, you know, even are the right words coming out sometimes, which just adds a whole other difficulty to it, you know.
They know what they mean, but
Yeah.
actually that's not what they're saying.
The wrong words are
It's the
coming
wrong
Yeah.
word coming out. Yeah.
which could also, you know, come into those difficulties with, well, are you lying because you just told me it was this?
Yeah.
But, you know, just one word, switching out one word can make all the difference. But so that's just a whole nother complexity of it, isn't it? And audio processing. I know
I think
you've got a lot.
Yeah, I know that. So what I've learned together with the mainstream schools that my children have been trying to kind of survive in, when it comes to FASD, audibly, so there's a teacher in the front of the classroom, and even if they've got a learning support system with them, even if it's recognised, certainly when you get into secondary, that's a little bit tricky because our children don't look different and they don't want to look different. So a teacher is given quite a straightforward, so let's not even look at it, you know, pick your book up, then do that, then do that, then do that, then do that, because that's really complex. A very straightforward instruction that audibly they're picking up, their brain is picking up about every third word that's being said. So they are then trying to piece together that sentence, and then everyone heard what I've said? Yeah, and they're so clever at like, yeah, absolutely. So, and then sometimes if they've pieced it together and you could say, well, what did I say? What have I asked you to do? Because I've made this mistake before. What have I just asked you to do then? Go and get the blue bag from my bedroom and bring it downstairs and put the dirty washing into it. Okay, so they have heard what I've said, but then they can't actually start. They can't start those.
Yeah.
They don't know where to start with that little chain
Just
of events.
repeating
I guess
what
we-
they've heard. It doesn't.
The world recently is seeing this, because if you think about the amount of video conferences you've been on and the buffering has been great, you've heard maybe a third of what's going on and you're having to work off.
And so the stress
This
of that,
is a
like,
daily
oh.
thing for children with FASD.
So that
they have to
just
deal
shows
with.
how exhausting it is for them to be in school
Yeah.
when they're trying to, and just because they've heard it doesn't mean they understand it.
Yeah.
Just because they've heard it, it doesn't mean they understand how that fits into context and what it means, what it is asking of them. So yeah, I've heard that I need to do that, or go over to the Bunsen burners and do this, but they don't really know
Well, that
how to
makes
start.
perfect sense. If that's the audio processing part of it, that would make perfect sense why recounting what's happened happens, because that's what they've pieced together. And
Yes,
you know, depending on how long you leave that, or how far into that kind of story that they have to recount again, that's going to be. Yeah.
One of the best, I think, a really good analogy for an FASD brain, and it's a brilliant mind called Jeff Noble, and he's based in Canada, and he talks about an FASD brain being like the light bulb that you've got in your house in one of your cupboards or somewhere, and it's got a little bit of a short, but some days you switch it on, it turns straight on and it works perfectly, and it switches off when you switch it off. Other days it takes a few goes, and then some days it's on and then just keeps doing a little bit of a short, because some days an FASD brain, and we don't know why this happens, is capable of doing exactly what is expected to survive that day. Other days they just can't do it. There's no memory recall, you know, and you can't. I've certainly measured with mine, like, is it sleep, is it what they're eating, is it what's going on around them, and there's no rhyme or reason to it at all as to why they can.
Those
Cool.
inconsistencies can be.
And that's so frustrating
Really
for teachers as well.
Yeah,
to
because
have to cope with.
I mean, there's certain things, like say ADHD, for example, well documented that certain medication will not cure it, but manage it day to day. But what you said with FASD previously is that might work for a week, and then next week that completely stops working.
And it might
So
work
there's
for
no-
one child, and someone else who's completely the same kind of profile, that medication just doesn't do anything for them.
Yeah, so I mean, it must be tricky. So in terms of, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but in terms of academic studies that have been carried out with the, you know, the effect of, you know, this processing on child's ability to learn as well, because it's not just, I guess, language that children learn. They learn through social interaction. They learn through doing and stuff as well. I mean, in terms of motor skills and things like actually physically undertaking manual tasks? Is that impacted by this whole process as well, or is it different?
Certainly can be.
Yeah,
Everything. I think, to be honest, I think anything that you can think of that could be,
yeah.
could be.
So it's a whole system, it's not just one area, it's the whole
Not
system
at all,
that's...
not at all. And it will be completely different. So the most important thing, and I don't think this is just for education, I think this is every aspect of life, but the most important thing is to consider strength profiles and consider that daily, really.
Yeah.
You know, if Claire can run through that list for her, each individual children every morning and be like, well, I know not to do that with that child,
Yeah.
and I know not to do that with that child, and to ask this child in this way. But some days that might not work, and you then have to make a mental note of like, right, memory, like the light switch, memory's not
Yeah.
working that well, and you have to be ready with this insanely huge toolkit of strategies to fire off the next thing, because something as simple as language, the words you use, you know, in my experience, one of the biggest mistakes I made when I really realised how much of a problem I was causing in something so simple, I asked a little, what was he, like probably 9, 10, I asked him to put his shoes on. And I just said, can you put your shoes on, please? You know, we've got to go. Can you put your shoes on? He's going. And you could watch it leave. And I was like, can you put your shoes on for me? He's like, because he can put his shoes on. But a week later, he came back to me and went, I've got my shoes on. I was like, okay.
Yeah, will you put your shoes on now? Yeah, okay.
And
Yeah.
something so simple, it took me so long to be like, that was me causing that problem. And then I didn't react in the right way when he came and told me that he had his shoes on. Because I was like, cool, everybody's got their shoes on, we're on a field.
It's so difficult. Like I'm 13 years in, and I'm still learning, making mistakes every single day and learning stuff every day. Now I can look at any one of my children and know whether or not I'm even going to attempt to say, there's a pile of clothes, or whether or not I just pull the bottom of the quilt back and start and put socks on a 15-year-old, which a lot of people will be like, you're putting socks on your 15-year-old? No, you shouldn't be doing that. But if I don't, then the socks aren't getting put on and nothing else is going to potentially attempt to happen in that day.
Yeah.
So, and it's just, it's so hard to pick out, and I think this is why I feel so much for teachers and learning support assistants who are kind of allocated a child with an FASD brain, because your arsenal has to be huge and ever changing all the time. So you just think it's awful for their self-confidence as educators, because they just think, oh, this is absolutely brilliant, we've got this little routine going, and then it just completely stops working for no reason. So then they doubt their ability and it knocks their confidence. It's so, and there's no answer to it. You've just got to just not take it to heart, not give in, just like dig into the bag and think what's going to work, what's going to work next. And that's and for as frustrating as it is for somebody taking care of a child with this, it's a billion times more frustrating for that child.
Yeah.
You know, it's happening to them. We're just trying to help guide them through it. Because I always say that I think someone asked me to write down, like in a day, the interventions that are between, or even just for one child, and I can't do it because there are so many, and I don't even notice what they are. So I actually think I might put a GoPro on my head one day, and then and just do my day and forget about it. And my days are so manic, I would just forget there was a camera on my head easily. Do my whole day and then watch it back, and then be able to write down what I was watching unfold, what I did, and just to see.
It's almost like that film, it's Memento, where the guy, so basically there's a guy, he has some kind of neurological condition, or whether it's been an accident, and he basically has to write everything on his body, because he can only remember what happened that last day, anything before, so he's writing down everything that's happened. And I guess you're piecing together that day, because sometimes there'll be something you'll have missed, or a gesture that was somebody else in the room, or change of light.
Yeah. I think it'd be really interesting to do.
Yeah, cool. So we'll bring this one to a close, because we could really talk for days about the Symptoms How It Presents, but I guess if you want to put it in context and and we're not saying this is definitely what it is, but you might have seen, the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer, where one of the people in that documentary, was under police interrogation, and Jess, you were saying that you think.
Yeah. For those who have seen it will know what we're talking about. But when there was the police interrogation, and every response was, yeah, and the police were interrogating in a way that, well, you saw that happen, didn't you? So there's a few things, and we're definitely not saying that he has FASD, this person that we're talking about, but this is a great example that many people will have seen that shows what we've just been talking about. The need to please people in that position of authority, and the want to just get out of that situation as quickly as possible because they're so uncomfortable, that fight or flight's kicking in, and they're just answering questions like yes, 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 like let me out, let me go home. But also the confabulation and pulling in memories that are probably from like video games or television, and like really graphic detail of things that I'm not too sure were ever proved in that case of making a murderer. And you see this quite often on those police type shows where they are questioning somebody, and you can, and now I know what I do, and you probably find the same thing, but you watch it and you're thinking, I'm not, like, you're confessing and I'm not convinced at all. Like, they're saying all the right things, but there's just something
it's a really vulnerable brain,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's a really vulnerable brain, and it's so easily manipulated.
And I guess that ties into what we were potentially talking about around how many people in the criminal justice system are in there because of their condition, not actually because they've been involved. So great. So we'll bring that to a close. We're going to record the next one straight after this, so that'll be exciting, so stay tuned. We've also got the other 2 episodes on there, so have a look on the YouTube channels. We are down as Nudge Education on Spotify. We're also on Anchor FM, Josh, is that right?
Yeah.
Anchor.fm. So the video and the audio will be out there, and don't forget that it's International Awareness Day for FSD on the 9th of September. Thank you. So we'll be putting a lot more stuff out there. We'll be sharing the links of things we've discussed, and see you again soon.